Okay, hello everyone. I want to welcome everyone to this session, Leading with the 4C's: Communication, Connection, Commitment, and Care. It's an honor and a pleasure to welcome Julie Nee here with us. She's a performance and growth architect who helps organizations bridge heart and high performance to create lasting results. Julie's the Vice President of Training for the John Gordon Positive Training Company, as well as co-founder of You Grow Girl. Julie spent 19 years in sales leadership at the Hershey Company. She built national sales teams, launched multi-million dollar product lines, and scaling industry channels. For the last 10 years, Julie has helped corporations spark sustainable growth, sustainable cultural change, certified facilitators. And by the way, she was my trainer in the John Gordon Certified Positive Leadership, so I know how impactful she is. But she certified facilitators globally and equipped women to embrace confidence and growth through transformational programs. Welcome, Julie Nee. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Bill. And I'm so glad that you got to be the one to introduce me today. And welcome, everyone. Eric, you are the first one with your camera on. I love it. And I was
Only because I
actually
didn't have
just going
enough
to
time to turn it
ask,
off.
say again.
This is only because I didn't have enough time to click the button, turn it off. No, I'm joking.
Oh, come
I'm
on.
playing.
Well, I
I'll
am
keep
going
it
to thank
on.
you right off the
No,
bat for leading the way. And I was
no
going
problem.
to ask the rest of the group if you're willing and open to it and you want to turn your camera on. Jennifer, yes. Alea, I hope I pronounced that right. Or Alea, you can give me a nod. Yes. Okay. I'm so happy to see you and anyone else who wants to turn on their camera. It's just great to be able to have that kind of one-to-one connection because I do intend to doing some interaction while we're together for the next 30 minutes or so. So we're talking about the 4 C's today and specifically leading with the 4 C's. Hello, Sharissa. And what we're going to talk about is communication, connection, commitment, and care. And this specifically comes from one of the lessons inside the power of positive leadership training. But specifically, when we're leading this way, it's about investing in relationships. It's about bringing out the best in others. It's about coaching, encouraging, serving, caring, specifically caring. Obviously, we're at the Culture of Care Summit, and it's about being someone that your team can trust. And really, our success in leadership comes down to people and relationships and being able to build something great together. So, I wanted to really just start with a little bit of interaction. And I'm going to tell you a story while I'm asking you to put this in the chat. Hi, Catherine. So I want you to start thinking about 3 positive words about you. And when you get them, I want you to put them in the chat. But while you're thinking, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. Hi, Gina. And here's the story. I was preparing for a client event. This is about a year ago. And I had a client event the next day. And I was sitting at the bar at the hotel where I was staying the night before, just having dinner and chatting with the staff. And there was a lot of small talk happening. There was a female bartender behind the bar and a couple of guy waiters over on the side, and everybody was just making some small talk. And interestingly, after 15 minutes or so of doing this, the guy at the end of the bar said, "Gosh, this small talk, let's talk about something more important. Like give me something meaningful." And I was like, "Let's go." I said, "I have something for you." Because I knew I was going to be doing this activity with my client the next day. So I said, "Why don't you guys tell me 3 positive words about you?" And interestingly, the guy who initiated this idea of having a deeper conversation was like quickly rattled off, "I'm awesome, I'm energetic, whatever he said." And same with the other guys that were standing around. And interestingly, the female bartender right in front of me, who I'd been talking to for the last 45 minutes, was like, "I don't really know anything positive about myself." And I said, "Well, I've been sitting here for a little while, so how about we start with friendly?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I am friendly." And then we started talking about different things, good, nice customer service and funny and all the things, but it didn't come naturally to her to say those words about herself. She could have rattled off some positive words about her colleagues, about me maybe, about anyone else, but she was having a hard time saying it about herself. So I thought just as a little warm up, yes, Beverly. Okay, here we go. Beverly, smart, funny, and helpful. Sharissa, intelligent, kind, and powerful. I love that. Is it Aaliyah? I want to make sure I get it right.
It's Aaliyah.
Aaliyah, good.
Mhm.
Aaliyah, kind, patient, supportive, and empathetic. Oh, these are so good. Gina, passionate, sharing, and curious. I want to, oops, they're going by too fast. Allison, energetic, empathetic, and funny. Bill, honest, optimistic, and friendly. Yes, so true. Loyal, organized, and honest. Helpful, caring, and dependable. I love these. Thank you so much for putting these into the chat. Tony, supportive, caring, and honest. And isn't it good to just kind of refresh yourself in the middle of the day to say, hey, these are some things that are really positive about me. And it's a good way to just refresh your mind sometimes and remind yourself that it's not just about everyone else. Sometimes it's about starting with yourself first. And Sarah, I see loyal, generous, and chatty. I like it. And I like that you said that as a positive because you know what? You're putting your ideas out there in the world and you're making conversation with people that maybe would have been quiet and all the things. So that's so cool. And oh, Sharissa, I love that encouragement. We all need encouragement when we're talking about this too. So thank you for feeding into that. And I mentioned that this particular topic is inside one of the principles from the Power of Positive Leadership training. And specifically, it's inside this idea of positive leaders creating great relationships and teams. And that's really what this is all about. So let's talk about the 4C's. The 4C's are communication, connection, commitment, and care. And really, when you think about it, communication leads to connection. Communication builds trust. Connection is where we form a bond. And you'll never have commitment without connection. So that connection comes first, and then you get commitment. And we'll talk about each of these. And then, of course, committed teams show that they care. Committed leaders and committed teams. And when we talk about, we're going to start with the first C, which is communication. And this one is really, really important. So we're going to spend a chunk of time here. So when we talk about relationships, most relationships, and this goes for our business relationships and our personal relationships, they break down because of poor communication. And communication builds trust. Trust is what generates that commitment. Commitment fosters teamwork. And teamwork is what delivers results. And so I want to share this saying that John Gordon has said 100 times, and I probably said, I mean, he said it 1,000 times, and I've said it hundreds of times, but this one is so important. Where there is a void in communication, negativity is going to fill it. And I want you to think about this. Thank you for the nods. Like, oh, yes, that's so true. Yep. I see Sharissa. I see you, Gina. It's true. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One example of this is maybe when our company or organization is going through some kind of a reorg or a change, a structure change, right? And I'll give you an example of one time when I was going through this with Hershey. We used to go through some kind of reorg about every 5 years or so, but this particular one, I was living in Hershey and I was working in the home office and all the doors were closed. Everybody, all the leaders' doors were closed all the time, and there were lots of whispers and secret meetings going on all the time, and nobody was saying anything. And we were all left wondering, am I going to have a box on the org chart? And it didn't feel good. And so alternatively, if someone would have been filling that void with their positive communication, what they could have said is, hey, team, we're going through some change. It's going to be happening over the next 6 months. I can't really share much right now, but what I am committed to doing is sharing a little bit with you every week. So then every week coming back and saying what you can say. So when I say fill the void, I don't mean you have to tell me everything because we can't do that as leaders. We can't tell our teams everything. If we're on the receiving end of everything, we can't expect to know the whole picture right at the beginning of things. But what we can do is say something to fill that void so people aren't making up their own stories. That's the key, is just to have some way to fill the void. And by the way, this goes with couples. This goes with your teammates. I mean, sometimes people make up stories if you get silent and then, oh, she's mad at me. He's mad at me. Oh, I must have upset him. And we make up all these stories. So say something. We have to fill that void. And I wonder if any of you want to share an example. You can raise your real hand or your virtual hand or however you want to do it. But have you ever had this situation where there was a big void and maybe you started making up stories? Does anyone want to share an example of that?
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, that's funny. That was my watch. Did you guys hear that? My watch did not get the question, but hopefully you did. If anyone wants to share an example, I'm here for it. Or I can share more, or we can keep on moving. But I want to just know that I want you to know that this is about you too, and just how we learn to intentionally fill the void. So we'll keep talking about it, and I'll leave it open that you can raise your hand at any point. So let's talk about communication a little bit more. Why do you think we don't communicate well? And you can drop this in the chat if you want. Why do we not communicate well in general? Yes, Catherine, fear. We want to be liked. We don't want to upset the apple cart, right? So I'm afraid of what might happen if I say something to you. And yes, Jennifer, digital communication is easier, but not effective. I mean, think about the number of times when you might have been the deliverer of the message or the receiver of the message where someone said, well, I sent the email. Everybody got the message. They know. They know what we're doing. They know where we're going. They received it. I sent the email. So of course it's received and absorbed just as I intended. And we don't follow up on it. We don't circle back. We don't ask questions. We don't do anything. We just send it and forget it, right? Well, that doesn't really work, right? And Julie, we don't always listen. So true. We just we're hard charging through our own agenda sometimes, and we're not listening. I'll tell you a funny story since you said that, Julie. It just reminds me of a really funny story early in my career, and I'll try to make this quick. But I was at the beginning of my Hershey career in my early 20s, and they were doing sales training for us. And so they were recording us doing these simulated sales conversations. And in this conversation, I'm going to age myself a little bit. This was back in the day when we had Hershey Kisses that were made like Jurassic Park. Okay. So we had special wraps. So I was doing this simulation with my customer and I said, hey, and I was selling the next year, which was the Lost World, the new packaging for the Lost World. I said, how did your Jurassic Park event go last year? And the fake customer said, it was horrible. It didn't sell through. It didn't do well, all this stuff. And I was like, great. Let me tell you about the Lost World. And literally, I would not have believed that I did that if I had not seen myself on video. I was so focused on my own agenda of trying to sell the program for the next year that I did not even hear the customer say how bad the program was the previous year. So you're so right in saying that, Julie, that we don't listen. It's so true. We really have to stop our own agenda spinning so fast so we can focus on others. And yeah, Janine, we think we're being clear when we're not. That's why we have to ask, hey, what did you hear me say? Right? Check back in. And yes, differentiated communication styles, perception, yeah, lack of trust. Yeah, fear of not being accepted, different styles, short and to the point versus too many details. Part of that, Gina, is like knowing our team. We have to know how our team wants to be communicated to, right? Some people do want the whole book of all the details. Others want that, be right, be bright, be gone. So really, really good. And yeah, Bill, you're right about unconscious bias. People are sometimes rushing to judgment. So great, great answers here. So I want you to just think about this scale on the slide right now. And you don't have to put it in the chat. You don't have to tell anybody. I just want you to think about, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you communicate with your full team? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you communicate with your people individually? And what I often find here, and by the way, if you want to put it in the chat, you can, you don't need to. But what I often find here is that people say they are excellent one-on-one, not as good in a group. And so learning how to practice getting better at our communication in a group with our team is really important. So I wanted to share some communication strategies with you, and I want you to be able to add on to these too. So let's start with the first one. we were just talking about that void in communication. So, one, how do we fill the communication void? One way is don't wait for a crisis. If your team never hears from you until there's a crisis, that's a big problem because now you have no trust and you're trying to solve this big problem together and it's not going to work. The second one is establish routine connections with your individuals, so your one-on-ones, and your team with groups. And this one's really important. I think sometimes we think that our people don't want this, but they actually do. And I remember a time at Hershey where I was leading a team all over the US and I was on the road every single week traveling and I would just let my one-on-ones kind of slip off the calendar. And my team corrected me pretty quickly. They were like, hey man, we need the one-on-ones. You have to protect those. And so I had to readjust and really work my travel and my client meetings around protecting those one-on-ones. So those are really important. And then of course, honesty and transparency. The second one, leading by walking around. Go to your people. And by the way, I realize that a lot of us work in virtual environments. So that going to your people might look like jumping on Teams or jumping on Zoom or something like that. But it doesn't mean just always being a keyboard warrior. It means some way of finding a way to connect. Share a coffee or a meal or a walk and talk. Walk and talks are great ways to communicate and connect with your people. It allows you to take the temperature of what's going on around you. If you stay in your desk, or in your cube or in your office or whatever it is behind your desk, you're not going to know what's really happening out there in the world of your business. And then one of you already mentioned, listening is communicating. Be present. Put this phone down. Put your phone down when you're talking to people. And when you're on Zoom and on the computer, you don't need to be clicking in the background because otherwise you're not making people feel important. So find a way to do those things and just be where you are. And then listen to understand and not to respond. Back to what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. And then lastly, and by the way, there are millions of communication strategies. These are just 4. Shout praise, whisper criticism. So call your people out and shout them out in public, but talk to them privately about the things that aren't going right. Smile at your people. And even through Zoom, like hopefully you can feel my energy and my smile through the Zoom screen. You can still do this virtually. You can still smile at people. You can spread positive gossip. This is one of my favorite ones because you think about how fast negative gossip can catch on like wildfire and spread through an organization or on social media or whatever it is. But imagine if we said to each other, oh my gosh, did you hear what Aaliyah did on that project? I gave her ownership of that thing and she took the reins and she, rallied the troops and she put deliverables into action and she delivered every single one of those. And we could not have done it without her. I mean, how cool would it be if that kind of a rumor started spreading, right? And then also positive nonverbals. What does that look like? That looks like more open body language. It looks like leaning in. It looks like making eye contact. It looks like asking questions. There's so much with our body language that we can do to be more open and engaged with the people around us. So I wanted to just see, does anyone want to add anything to this? You can raise your hand or you can drop it in the chat. But what do you think? What would you add to these communication strategies?
Julie, the one thing that comes to mind in my mind is there's 3 types of communication, and you just mentioned them: verbal, nonverbal, paraverbal, the pace in which we speak, and I love your energy. And then also 3 parts to any communication. There is a content part. This is stuff I've learned and reinforced. Content part, there is a tone, the feeling part, and then also the relational part where people sense, like you said, coming through the screen here, that I want this relationship. And what I sense from you as you communicate is you want to connect with us. So very, very, very important in the dynamic. So there's my 2 cents. I'll stick with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else wants to share?
I also like to bring a personal touch. How was your weekend? How was your weekend? How's your dog doing? How was your kid's soccer game? I think it doesn't, you don't have to cross like personal boundaries to get to know somebody a little bit and just show that you care more than just like, hey, what's the update on that project or that work thing.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Jennifer, I love that. And there's so many layers to what you just said, but it's all really comes down to building relationships, right? And that's connecting with someone. And even inside some of John's work, we talk about the idea of connecting before you correct. So, and not that it's always correcting, but even with my team at Hershey, the very last team that I had before I left Hershey 10 years ago to join John and start doing this work. But the very last role I had was mostly it just happened to be mostly a male team, which that's great. But when I started spending time connecting with the guys on my team before I would go into the business, at first they were like, "What? Why are you, what are we talking about? Like, why are you asking me all these things?" But once they got used to it, they loved that part of it and that I actually saw them and that I could see who they are and I was interested in how they were feeling and what they were about. And to your point, how's your daughter doing? What's going on with this? All the things. And like, it's a few minutes before we get into the bulk of the meeting, but it's not just like driving right in. Yeah, that's important. Thank you.
This is Yvonne. I think the connection is just, I think it's the number one thing for so many things. In my past life, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I spent a lot of time working with families and communicating about finding that connection with one another too, because people think, oh, that's my brother, or that's my wife, or that's my husband, and so we connect just because we're in the same household. But that's really not true. And the same is true thing is true for work. You can't just make that assumption because you're working in the same department or wherever it is that you already have that connection. And the other thing is I just real quickly, I was in the classroom yesterday and I had never had a student do this before, but I mentioned that I'm a gamer. I like to play video games, and so I actually call myself a gamer. And and one student said, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen a professor talk about gaming. What do you play?" And so now we've already like communicated back and forth like 4 times since yesterday, just because I've made that connection. And so now we're starting to talk about the class. So there's always something someone's interested in their lives. You may
Oh,
not know what it
yes.
is, but you can try to find out what that is. They collect rocks. They play bridge. I mean, it's just something to find what that connection is, and it's important to me to find out what that connection is. So,
Yes, I love that so much. Thank you, Yvonne, for sharing that. And
And Julie, can I say something real quick
yeah.
on piggyback on Yvonne here? She talked about, finding that connection with people, right? What I just want to say is find that common ground, be open to experience, find a common ground. And I have to just share a quick little story with Yvonne. Once I got to know her, we were communicating, and I found out that she's a baseball fan. And the next thing, the conversation evolved. And the next thing, we were talking about her love for the Yankees and her growing up watching Bucky Dent. And all of a sudden, that turned into a great work relationship here where I'm able to call her Dr. Dent because I know she's a big fan. But she is a charm. And if you don't take that step sometimes and take a leap of faith and get to know people, you'll never make those discoveries. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I love that. And by the way, we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we talk about connection, but just being willing to kind of share a few nuggets about yourself beyond kind of your job title and your mask that you wear, right? Just that little thing of saying, I'm a gamer, right, is so important. But also ask good questions, like do activities with your team where you can learn fun facts about them. I mean, it can be something as simple as two truths and a lie, right? It doesn't have to be some big, serious business conversation, right? But something where you can learn about them. So I love that. And Charles, thank you for sharing that idea of scaffolding. That's so cool because it really is something that builds and strengthens our relationships. So before we move into connection, I want to just give you an action. And I want you to go back and I ask your team on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you communicate? And have them really tell them you want the truth and what would make it a 10. And just be open to that feedback. Because if they say, you know what, it's a 7, but here's how you could make it a 10, think about the growth that's possible for you as a leader if you can be open to that feedback from your team. So that's one of my asks in terms of coming out of here today. I want you to go ask your team that. And you're right, Eric, one person's 10 might not be another's, but if you can gather different bits of feedback and maybe you look for the things that are most consistent. You know what, I heard this thing 3 or 4 times, so maybe that's something I need to look at. One that's maybe a one-off, okay, maybe that's just that person's opinion. But some consistent feedback might be something you need to look at a little bit further. So let's move to the second C, and that is connection. I already said communication builds trust, but connection is where you form a bond with your team. And really, connection is the difference between good and great. And as a leader, you foster connections with your people, but you also foster those connections among your people. So it's you creating the relationship with them, and then you give them a forum, like team building, like time together as a group to build those connections with each other. And I wanted to just share 2 ways to do that. We're not going to do these today, but these are just 2 things that you can bring back to your team. One, this is sort of in the spirit of 2 truths and a lie, but not the same. And it's called Fact Connect. So in this particular game, the instructions are you'll be in group. Let's just say you're in a circle of 10 people. And one person is going to share a few short facts about themselves. So I might say, if I were starting, I might say, I was born in Washington, D.C. My first job was a paper route. I delivered the Alexandria Gazette, the Washington Times, and the Washington Post. And the hardest part about that Washington Post job was dragging my little red wagon through the snow with those big giant Sunday papers. So that was about 30 seconds or so, but there were a lot of facts someone could connect to. So then if I were standing in a circle, I would go like this. And I would point to somebody and they don't know that I'm pointing at them. Or if we're doing it in Zoom, I would say, Charles, you're up. So hopefully Charles would have been listening. And then Charles could connect to either first job, where he was born, a little red wagon, something about a newspaper, whatever it is. And he would weave in something about one of those things into his facts. And then the next person would connect back to one of his facts. So it's not everybody's connecting back to my facts. Everybody's connecting to the previous person's facts. And it's just really fun to see what you learn about people when you start it that way. So it's just a really fun game. And if any of you want like more robust directions for this, I'll give you my email address at the end and you can email me. I'd be happy to send you some bigger directions. And then the next one is if you want to go a little deeper with your teams, you can do what we call the defining moment activity. And essentially you'll sit in a circle or at a table or however you're set up, or in Zoom, same thing. And each person shares kind of a defining moment that made them who they are today. And just be sure when you do this defining moment activity that you set the tone that what happens in the room stays in the room. So if people share something that's really vulnerable, it stays in the room. So those are some great ideas to really go connect with your team, or 2 truths and a lie, however you guys want to do it, but do something to build those connections with you and your team. And then the third C is commitment. It's always about we versus me. It's about what is the good of the team versus what is good for myself and how do I put the spotlight on myself. And as a leader, we always go first. When you think about commitment, it always looks like service and sacrifice. So when I'm putting the team above myself, I'm going to have to give something, right? I'm going to have to do something to make, sacrifice myself for the good of the team. And when we talk about commitment, we often talk about this idea that commitment recognizes commitment. So when I show my commitment to my team, for example, I might be working extra hours. I might be meeting at a time that's not really convenient for me. I might be pulling the weight on some projects because someone has to step out for another reason, whatever it is. But we lead and we show that by demonstrating our commitment first, and then we get that commitment back from our people. When we go first and we show people our commitment, people are going to walk through brick walls for us. I mean, they really, really are. And thank you for the nodding because it really is true on that. And then lastly, care. And I love that this is so connected to the culture of care, but caring, this is a John Gordon quote, by the way, caring is the difference between average and greatness. And if you don't care, you're not taking the time to encourage your team, to communicate with your team, to commit, connect, to sacrifice. When you care, people know it and you're showing it, and people can feel that care. Or, frankly, they can feel it if you don't. And when we talk about positive leaders, we really just say positive leaders care more. They do more, they give more, they encourage more, they help more, they guide more, they mentor more, they develop more, they build more, and ultimately they accomplish more. And when we talk about caring, John Gordon likes to talk about this idea of a caring trademark. And a caring trademark is simply this: it's the way that you uniquely show you care. It's different than anybody else. And he uses a few examples. One of them is when his mom wanted to make him a sandwich, and he was leaving to go on a trip and he wasn't even hungry, but she was like, I want to make you a sandwich. Well, it turned out that her caring trademark was making food for him, and that's how she showed her love. Another example is a leader named Alan Mulally, who wrote over 10,000 thank you notes during the course of his career. And they were specific ones. They were literally talking about thank you for specifically what you did on this project to make a difference. It wasn't just a blanket thanks for a great first quarter, right? Specific thank you notes. And then another example of a caring trademark is time. But we all have different ones. And I wonder if you know what yours is. Does anyone, if you have a caring trademark, can you drop it in the chat? Oh, and I love that. I love that note in the chat, Janine. A short response today is better than a long response next week. That's so good. I know I'm a little behind on that, but that's so true. Who has a caring trademark they want to share? Some people say, I've had people say that they have a candy drawer in their desk that they leave, that if people come by, they'll open it and people can get candy. Okay, poopery, that is hilarious, Sarah. I've never heard that before, but I love that. And Sarah probably sits by the bathroom in her office, and so that it is a gift to herself, right? And everyone else. Gift giving. So yeah, Jennifer, if you haven't thought about it, and maybe if you don't even know, ask your team. Say, hey, what have you noticed that I do, that shows you that I care? And they're going to come back, oh my gosh, you always do this, right? And then you'll realize, oh, that's my caring trademark. And yeah, Bill, I love that. Sincere compliments. And what is this? There are 20 plus women in one building. That's so funny. Sorry, back to the thing. Okay. So think about the caring trademark, and that's kind of what I want to leave you with. Whether it's your caring trademark, whether it's something else, I want you to commit to. I already asked you to go ask your team the communication question, but I want you to think about some kind of immediate caring action you can do before the end of today. So just what's some small thing you can do for someone on your team, just a small caring action, whether it's within your caring trademark or not. I want you to do that today. So now's the time. We only have a couple minutes left, but there's a couple minutes for any open Q&A if you want it. And also if you want to grab a screenshot or take a note of my email address or my phone number, or if you want to connect on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, I'd love to connect with you and support any of you. But I will go ahead and put my screen down for a couple of minutes, and I can also drop my contact information in the chat if you need it. But just any questions on the 4C's or anything else? I know that 30 minutes goes by really fast, doesn't it?
I'll make a comment. This is absolutely spot on. Reinforces things that I've seen. Julie, I've grown a lot, reading the Energy Bus, Power of Positive Leadership certification. I believe it's all practical. It's easy to apply. I get it in the brain. I can execute it well, and I do it sincerely, authentically, and genuinely. So I love these principles. I just want to tell you that, and I think you did a fantastic job here. Matter of fact, I screenshotted a couple of your slides because I want to save them as a reminder and a refresher. But I thank you very much, and I know we thank you for being here and donating your time and everything to our culture of care. And I want to leave the group with one thing you did in some training I was really recently in. with you for the certified positive leader. And the one thing that you open with, which was an icebreaker. We need good icebreakers, right? You open with this in the meeting. You said, "Okay, everybody, tell me something good," and you referenced that song from the past, and everybody was giving them something good, and it got the whole thing just rolling. So icebreakers are important. I wanted to close with that, but tell you did a super job. I'll leave it the floor for anybody else here.
Thank you, Bill. Well, since you brought that up, I would like to recommend that everyone use that. Tell me something good is the greatest way to start a Zoom, start a live huddle, start a shift meeting, start any kind of meeting. And it's literally just tell me something good. And it can be on any topic, right? They don't have to share something good at work. They can share, my daughter just had a baby. Somebody's getting married. I'm cancer free. I just rang the bell. Like it could be anything. It could be I saw flowers on my way to work this morning. It could be anything small or big, but it's a great way to open a meeting. So thank you. And you know what, Bill? I would love to see your screenshots, but also, are you guys willing to take a picture? Are we allowed to take a picture?
I would think you can if everybody's okay. I don't think it's bad to take a screenshot.
Are you guys open to a picture? All right, let's do it. I'm going to take a screenshot. Here we go. Whoops. Hold on. I didn't do a good job with that. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Yay. Thank you all. And I can hang around. I don't know how this works, but I can hang around a couple more minutes if needed, or we can just sign off. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. And great session. Thank you.
Thanks.